can you believe every single person who literally has always seen us as nobodies, they're all waking up to an image of my son in every newspaper. They cannot ignore you. My name is Anto Neosoul. Government name is Anthony Mwangin Dongo. How did I come to be? So there's these two people. There's these two people who met in Nakuru when they were in high school. Actually, my parents are high school lovebirds. And I'm the second born of my family. I have two siblings. I have an elder brother and I have a younger brother. But my parents met in Nakuru. And yeah, they were both in high school. And right after high school, my mom gave birth to my brother, John, who's named after my dad's dad. I mean, it's Kikuyu tradition. And then I'm named after my mom's dad. I'm literally a product of love. In fact, the fact that I was born in November, I always say I'm a product of love. I'm one of those kids who, it took 9 months, I wasn't like an early baby. Clearly, my parents made love in February, and then I was born in November. I mean, it's 9 months, it's obvious. So I'm a true product of love. My parents always argue about my date of when I was born. And I think, those times we didn't have this behavior of the man coming to help the woman to push, holding the hand, even like rehearsing how it's gonna happen and doing vlogs. So my dad, culturally, he'd only come after I was born. So there's always the argument of whether I was born on the 9th of November or 11th of November. My dad insists it's the 11th. My mom insists the 9th. And so my mom she wins because she's like, I'm the one who pushed this one. So yeah. Then they also say that I was in a rush to leave. So out of all my mom's pregnancies, I was the fastest to leave. They're just like, wow, alikuwa na kirere too from just, I was the world, what's going happening? So I was born at Kenyatta National Hospital. In 1985, I was born, we say I was born in Kawangware. So I wasn't born in I was born in a pretty big family with my grandfather and my uncles and my cousins literally in the same neighborhood in Kawangware. But it wasn't like an easy life. It wasn't like we're not born rich, we didn't have the property. You'd have big land, but that, probably we say, asset rich, cash poor. I think that's how we were born. So, and at the end of the day, it wasn't my parents' assets, it was my grandfather's assets. So, grew up in Kawangware, born in 1985, just a few years after the coup, and also a few years after the sort of the banning of reggae music. So I was raised with reggae music in the background and really seeing a lot of my uncles playing and listening to reggae music. I can't remember my years, like a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, but I think from as a 5-year-old, I probably have a recollection of my relationship with music. I remember going to Shags in Kitale and literally being in church on a Sunday and the pastor asking, how they normally would ask, it doesn't want to present anything, you can go in front of the church. And I think I'm a 4 or 5-year-old and I go in front of the church and my aunties were actually shocked because I think for them it was like, hiya. That was the last thing. Everybody in church was shocked. And so I went in front of the church and I started singing. And this influence is coming from my being influenced by music in Nairobi. And so I sang in church and I think they were very, very mesmerized. And I think at the moment, they're based off of the reaction. As a kid, and I think as a smart kid, I sort of realized that there was something there. Come back to Nairobi, one day my dad is just mowing the lawn, he's just taking care of slashing and whatever. My mom is busy cleaning the windows, and Roberta Flack's Killing Me Softly starts to play in the background. And I don't know out of what recollection, I started singing the song with her in the background. And I think it was very shocking for my parents. I think that memory, that moment, I remember. My dad was genuinely surprised. Like, how is a 5-6-year-old singing Roberta Flack's Killing Me Softly? And I'm singing word for word. Like, how is this even possible? So I think by the time I was joining preschool, where my mom was actually a teacher, by the time I was joining preschool, the talent was clearly being noticed. And then also my confidence and all that stuff. It was actually the reason why my mom couldn't have me in the same class with her. Because when other kids, the first day I joined school, when other kids were like screaming for their parents, me I was looking at them like, huh? Why are you guys screaming? Because for me, in my head, I'm like, everyone says with their parent in school. Because me, I was remaining with my mom at Edel Queen Nursery School in Riruta. And let me tell you, when I think about that walk, wow, that walk is far from where I was living, Kawangware in Gatina, all the way to Riruta. That was a walk and a half. And my mom and I would do that walk every single day of my preschool life. And I have photos of myself, of me dancing in preschool and literally like pushing everyone to the front and doing that. So clearly that whole, the musicianship in me, the confidence in me was seen to a point where, like I said, my mom wouldn't have me in the same class with her because then I would be I was smart and I was confident. So I would raise up my hand and want to answer, and my mom didn't want to look like she was favoring me. My mom wasn't quite accepted by my in-laws, by her in-laws, who are my grandma and my aunties or whatever. And I think you know how people always keep these things in the family for a long time. I figured I would talk about this, and one of the reasons why, actually, if you look at my outfit today, like I told you guys at the beginning, I actually made this outfit specifically for this show, and I'll explain the significance of this outfit. It sort of has some semblance to prison outfits. So it's got a very, prison people sort of have these same stripes. And I think for me, the reason for wearing this is because I felt like this was one of those interviews where you sort of let yourself free, so some form of freedom with information. And so my mom was never really quite accepted by our in-laws, and that made our lives very difficult. It made our lives very difficult because my mom, the reason why my mom and I are very, very, very close, apart from the fact that I'm named after her dad. When I actually talk to my mom, she calls me dad. But also because I think growing up, you now realize now that I'm older, is that we only had each other. So I mean, some of my anxiety today, some of my dealing with people today is really heavily rooted in how we were raised. So I mean, would have a grandma who was literally, for lack of a better word, very mean to my mom. Those things you watch on TV and you're like, wow, these things actually happened. My auntie, for example, my auntie who's my dad's elder sister, was very unwelcoming towards us. Because she got married outside, so whenever she'd come home to visit, she'd bring fruits for my other cousins except myself. And I think as a kid, I didn't really realize it until maybe when I got older and I realized the sort of anger and hate that to be honest, that I still have towards them. I think for me to get out of that, I mean, my mom is always telling me, oh, you need to forgive people, you need to move on, if I did it. And I'm like, yeah, but that's you. Yeah, so you'd have my auntie who's my father's elder sister who, I mean, culturally she was married, so, because she was married culturally, so she had to leave outside. But whenever she'd come, I mean, she'd be very picky about who, and for me, when I think about it, and it saddens me how much hate or dislike they'd have towards my mom, who had not done anything to them. I mean, if you meet my mom, anybody who's my mom is one of the sweetest people you'd ever meet around. But I think that's the idea of always wanting, like, let's say, a certain son to marry someone specific who that family wants or whatever, whilst they've made their own choice to love each other and decide that this is the path they're going to take. So when you really think about me being as a product of love, I am a real product of love, but also the surroundings around me did not have any love at all. So I think as a kid, I was very oblivious to a lot of this hate. And I always remember that image of my auntie giving my cousins fruits and leaving me out. And what was also funny is that she actually gave my elder brother and left me out. And the reason for doing that is because my elder brother is named after her dad, my grandfather. And it's also, I think that Kikuyus do a lot, and I think it always breaks families apart, where whoever you're named after will signify how you'll be treated. So I think for me that was, I mean, and I remember us sitting on some ledger, some stone, and I mean I've always been short, and I remember like kicking my feet, and just wondering how everyone was getting and not me.
What fruit were they getting?
It was oranges. It was oranges, and I think I'm not those people. I don't hate oranges or whatever, but every time I see, I always remember. But as a kid growing up, it didn't stick to me, and it didn't stick in my head until I got older and I realized that people can be so mean. I mean, I used to have some of my aunties singing songs because my dad, was doing well. He was working for for a SACCO, that had parastatal employees. And my aunties would like be out here singing songs. And let me tell you, you guys think Swahili people have like, those, what's the word, like, looking for that in English, but in Swahili, kejeli, where they'd throw words or they'd wear lesos and, and just throw jabs, and throw jabs at you. Yo, Kikuyus can do it. Where they just sing like songs and, sing songs like, even us one day we will make it. My God, the God who serves you will also serve me one day. And I mean, just throwing jabs. And then, because you're brought up in a place like Kawangware, so the toilet's outside. So when you're walking towards the toilet, someone will always find a way to throw jabs. And you can imagine, for me, I am now cognizant of that now. But for my mom, you can imagine the weight that it had on her, the hate that they would send towards her, the rumors, the stories that they would say. I mean, I'd have an uncle who died of TB or something, and the rumor was that he died of HIV and AIDS, and they would say that my mom is the one spreading the rumors. I mean, they would make my mom's life so difficult. They made her life so difficult that when I think about how my mom was able to survive the hate and the displeasure and just the unwelcomingness. I mean, my mom also she'd also be in chamas, so, women groups. And again, my auntie who had her kids who were in Europe. And, now that I'm older, I realize these kids they actually ran away. They'd go for trips to Rome with their Catholic church, and they'd run away and not come back. But then they'd make it look like their kids were like selected to go to Europe and now they're working there. And we're talking about early 2000s, 99 Zuko, 95 Zuko. I'm probably 10, 11 years old. And they're making calls to her, to now my auntie. And my auntie would you can imagine how expensive that call is. And she'd take that phone and pass it around to everyone, apart from my mom. So all her nephews and her nieces are speaking to everyone else except her as an auntie. This is the middle of women's group. So you can imagine how my mom was feeling. So I mean, I have the Anto that you see. I mean, I talk about, like I said, I have never spoken about these issues before. I've reached a point where I'm now 38 years old. I don't need permission to seek permission and ask, how do you think this will feel? How will this be? These things, I think for me, have to be said because they make up the DNA of who I am. The way we behave, the way we carry ourselves, the way we handle relationships is very much based off of the way we grew up. And so that was my upbringing, very difficult, filled with a lot of love only from my mom and my dad and my siblings, but also filled with a lot of anxiety and just, just not being able to know how, tomorrow will be or how, and walking on eggshells. My mom is the queen of walking on eggshells. Oh my God, my mom walks on eggshells with a lot of people because she didn't want, you can imagine her being an outsider. She didn't want to piss off anyone. She didn't want to hurt anybody. I'm really thankful that they were never violent towards her because I think if they were, right now, being who I am, I would f them up. Oh my God, I would have, if I thought about it, I would use power and money to f them up. And I'm being very clear about how for me, it's not about how if I've healed enough. It's about the fact that I am very petty, and I am rightfully so, and it is my journey to walk, and I'm very okay to deal and handle them like that. So that experience and that upbringing has played a huge role, not only even as me as a musician, but how I carry myself and how I and how I and how aggressive I am, and how I want to own spaces, and how unapologetic I am about who I am. Because you don't. If we chose to be to how it would be created, I mean, there would probably not be no creation, because God will be like, hey, you guys have too many needs and wants. You've come back now, you want a different leg, now you want to be different. So we don't choose where we are born, who gives birth to us, who we are, how we look like, or how we are born. But I think based off of how we are bringing, it really plays a huge role in how we choose to live our lives. And so I choose to live my life unapologetically, regardless of how uneasy or difficult it is. I've tasted that wilderness, so I know what it means to be thirsty. I have tasted, I have tasted seeing wealth all around me and knowing how to be poor. Yet we are wealthy. I come from a wealthy family. I have tasted my grandmother having my cousins come over and she spoils them with money. I had a grandma who would have money rot in her house, but would rather die than help us. When I think about it now, I was thinking recently, and I never want to share this story with my mom. I don't even know if my mom would be able to watch this, because then I'm reminding her so much. I remember there's a time my mom would send me to go to a certain shop. It was a shop owned by some Borana lady family, and my mom sent me to buy things there. And I remember being sent to get stuff from the shop and going back to the house without. And it only hit me way later in life that we were actually going to, it was a debt, we were actually going to beg for stuff from that shop. And she said no. So it hit me later, and it hit me later, and I was like, wait, what did we eat that day? There's a moment I remembered recently. Actually, I remembered where the moment happened. I think I was either buying something online, I was doing shopping. And sometimes you genuinely look back to your life and you're like, I can't believe that maybe I can afford this, or I can't believe my house is like this. Oh, and by the way, I think that's one of the reasons why I have I have like 105 pairs of shoes. So, because when you're born poor like that, you just I think you end up having this hoarding mentality, because you always feel like you will lack these things one day. And so, I mean, when I think about it, and I just think about how did we eat that day, wait, we used to go there a lot, and I don't remember us exchanging money. But I also know that family had influence from our in-laws to even probably just mistreat us. And to be honest, I think the question that a lot of people would ask is why? Why probably my mom was being treated that way. But I think the real question should be, why do people see the need to treat anybody that way? I think there should never be, I think victims should never have to answer why perpetrators behave a certain way. And like I mentioned, I really, now that I got older and I got very close to my mom, I do know that there's a certain family, again, as wealthy as my grandma and my granddad, who wanted their daughter to be married by my dad. And my dad wasn't having any of it, and he didn't give two hoots about that lady or about that family. My dad was, I mean, it's, and especially those times, these things are very catch-22. My dad can't be out here, guns blazing, don't cheat my wife like this, when he clearly is also living on literally rented time, not land. Because that's his dad's land, my grandfather's dad, and our Kikuyu customs. Because I'm brought up I was born in Nairobi. My grandfather was half Masai, half Kikuyu. Again, I have my cousins and I have my grandmas and my granddads who were my dad's siblings, and my mom's and my grandma's siblings, who are all raised in Nairobi. So they were born there, so there's nowhere to go. So if my dad is out here trying to be guns blazing, where is he supposed to go? And also because we come from a very big family, but the things happening are quite very intimate, and my dad is working every single day, I think also people have their own ways of dealing with things. And I know my dad then used to be like a drinker. He wasn't an alcoholic at all, but my dad would imbibe. He would just do his thing, come back home in the evening, and there's always these jokes we have even at home. my dad would come back home singing. Like you'd hear my dad singing from Uka. And he's probably trying to ward off thieves. Wafikirie, hayuko sawa, so they don't steal from him. So I think as a kid, you don't understand these things. Again, when you get older, is when you also begin to understand. If let's say it's a lady, she'll understand why. She'll understand, oh my God, my mom went through this. I completely get it. People can just decide that you are literally not one of them, and they will just be like, you know. So when you're a kid, you probably see your parents go through certain things. You probably see them making certain choices or not making certain choices, which don't make sense to you because you're like, why would you not shout? Why would you not go and fight people? Why would you not? But then you understand that there's a certain level of wisdom they have to partake, and they have to sip that cup of wisdom every single day just so they can survive. When we moved out from Kawangware to Donholm, I think, and the way we moved out, I now understand. And we will get to that chapter later. But I now understand why people make certain choices. I now understand why my parents have the properties that they have, because now they had to build for themselves. Now they had to do what they had to do to be like, you know what? We cannot sit here and rely on these people's properties or these people's inheritance for us to make a living out of it. And to be honest, out of all my cousins, from my mom's side now, my dad and my mom, their kids, my siblings, we are probably the most successful. I am clearly the most well-known from that family. And it is because we didn't get comfortable. We didn't sit and expect things to be done for us. And I'll be very blunt and say, most of my cousins, some of them alcoholics, my uncles, alcoholics. I mean people who, if you meet them in the streets, you wouldn't want to associate yourself with them. Yet we were the ones who would look like we would end up that way. But because of the way we were treated, my parents had to do everything possible to make sure we got it right. And that's why my parents were very strict on us. Oh, my parents didn't take bullshit. Yay! Like they would take bullshit from people there, but not from us. We had to get our shit together. So that said though, it also informed us of having a very, having to work very hard in school. And even with this confidence and with this singing and with this, doing poems and whatever and poetry, I had to do it so well because I'm now being brought up in a place where, okay, if you're gonna do it, you do it really well. There's literally no other way. And I now remember when I would see my mom. My mom was a Montessori teacher. She's taught for, my mom now owns a school, but she's taught for over 30 years. And my mom, when I would see her making charts for kids in school, and I'd see her making blocks. I mean, my mom would go to carpenters to make those blocks for kids, for Montessori kids, and for her classes. And the charts, every single time, there'd be new ones. When I think now I sort of inherited that sort of perfectionism, or if you're gonna do it, then you do it well, or don't do it at all. So even when I was in Lavington Primary School, which my parents made sure, my dad made sure that I went to that school, and in our time, I mean, these schools, to be honest, have got very colonial history. In our time, unless you came from a certain family or you wouldn't go to those schools. But my dad made sure that I went to that school. And by the time I got to grade class 4, I'm old, so we say standard 4. By the time I got standard 4 there, bless her soul, my favorite teacher in the world, called Mrs. Owino. She, they saw the talent in me. And this one time, this one we're actually in class 3, standard 3. And our class is supposed to present Jesus is the Answer. The song is called Christ is the Answer. On the occasion of celebrating our headmistress then, Ms. Mutinda, who was leaving. And whilst we're performing, the whole standard 3 didn't know the second verse of Christ is the Answer. Let me explain to you that I now know what it means. For me, I understood what spiritual realms or just things happening without understanding how that happened, because I was born Catholic. I don't remember singing this song ever in my life. But a cousin of mine who were raised with, my mom was raising her, she's called Jacqueline, and I always grew up thinking she was my sister. She had these hymn books in the house, and Christ is the Answer was one of the hymn books that she would sing, and I probably had her, and I probably never used to sing with her. But when we go to the second verse of Christ is the Answer, I'm the only one out of the whole class who sang that song. So the teachers were like, you know what? We're going to flip this thing. We're going to change it. So class standard 3, they sang the first verse, and then I was left to sing the second verse on my own. My dad didn't come to that performance. By standard 4, and when the teachers had realized, hey, this kid has got some interesting, he's very talented. By standard 4, I was now on the annual prize giving day. I was now the one who would represent our class specifically. And by that time, Sister Act 2 had come out. And again, because this always been in a cocoon, so we wouldn't go out to play with our cousins, you know, and if we did, there'd always be some drama of I beat somebody. I mean, there'd always be some random drama of, oh, this kid beat this one. Just like, yani, just making our lives difficult. So we were cocooned inside our house, and my dad, you know, we had a TV, and he bought a VCR tape, and we were watching Sister Act 2, which is my favorite movie till today. And we're watching Sister Act 2. I remember that part where the kid sings "Oh Happy Days," and then he hits these high notes. And so I decided in standard 4 that that's the song I was going to perform. And I had 2 friends of mine. One actually we're still friends till now, by the way. She's called Sheila Rashid. She was on my right, and the other side was another girl called Anne. I can't remember her second name, but she was called Anne. So the 2 of them, and I picked by the hottest chicks. Like, I was like, so they're the ones who were gonna like sing with. So we started, even the way we performed, it was 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and then we turned. And then we started singing, oh happy days, oh happy days, oh happy days, oh when Jesus washed, ooh, my Jesus washed my sins away. Oh happy day, oh happy day, oh happy day, when Jesus washed, when Jesus washed. And I held that note. And someone just said amazing. That is mad. And then everybody, the whole school went mad, like nuts. Because, they were like, what was, you know, it was just the whole school went crazy. And I have the photo, insert photo here. And the whole school went crazy. And that time, there was like, Lavington Primary was a bougie ass school. So they're like district education officer, CDRI, principal, secretary. You know, I mean, that school where when something happened in Lavington Primary, the whole world wants to be there. And my dad had come to watch. And my dad is those people who, he won't sit at the back, he'll sit at the front. So if you're going to make him take off to come to school, he wants to sit there and watch. So by then my dad was over there. People went crazy. So, I mean, so people are, we're getting the usual awards for, best in this one, best in this class was this person, all that kind of stuff. and then the guest of honor tells the headmistress that he wants to see that kid who sang. So I'm called up on stage. So I get called up on stage, and then he actually handed me 350 shillings. We're talking about 1995. Bro, that's like handing me 13,000. So I'm handed 350 shillings. And as I'm coming down after now, people everyone is like going crazy, everyone is just happy and all that stuff. Mrs. Owino has called me, she's telling me, oh my God, they want to gift you. I'm just like, what is happening? So as I come down with the money, I give my dad the money. So my dad has the money. And then there's also these kids. You also have like some two rich kids who call, they're giving me like 5 bob. Like 5 shillings, and they're just, it's like a walk of honor. So now, when we're leaving now, when we're walking from Lavington going towards now Kawangware, going back home, and so the Kawangware that I was born in and grew up is one close to Lavington, and so people always, in fact, for the longest time, people always thought that when people hear these stories, they always think that I'm lying, because they always would see me walking towards Lavi as I go home, and so for the longest time they're like, but Anto lived in Lavington. Anto was like a bougie kid. And me in my head, I'm like, no, what are people talking about? It's just that I was brought up in Lavington Primary, so y'all never saw my struggle. But like, even now, oh my God, when I was thinking about this sit down, I was even thinking about how my mom would pack githeri for us, and my brother and I would never eat the githeri. Aki, my mom is gonna see this and she'll feel so sad. There's days, not every day, there's days we throw away the food, because we're like, I mean, kids of La Vie, there's a tuck shop. Some of them have been paid for school lunch, but school lunch in La Vie is like chips and sausages, chips and chicken. It's not the usual like. So us were that's there thinking, hey, we're eating githeri, hey, we're eating ugali. Nah, bruh, it's not gonna happen. So we were, we were the unlucky kids, sort of. But my talent sort of got me out of that whole, looking like you're poor. My talent made me look rich in Lavington Primary. So I mean, I perform, and then there's a thing. And by the way, I will never forget the walk of my dad and I, walking from school, going home, knowing that everybody's attention was on me, including my it's very difficult for me to call her that. My uncle's wife was, it's very difficult for me to call her auntie. I mean, I don't know what that means with her. So my uncle's wife would, she'd also come to, to see her kids in school. I mean, it's annual prize, so prize giving day, so everybody would come to school. And I could see how they were looking at us, and everyone's attention was on us. And just the joy of walking. And I think at that moment, now when I think about it, it made me realize that when you are given such a talent, when you're given such great things, and when that attention that spotlight is on you. And when people are used to sort of mudslinging you, but then now the talent is allowing people to sort of give you new clothes and dress you. It's basically undressing your stress. So they undress you with hate and with all this, just favoritism or whatever. Now you're being undressed with, undressing your stress. You're now all of a sudden looking so good in front of people. I think it made me realize, so this thing that I do, this thing that I sing can actually get me fame and favor. I remember as a kid, I may not have the vocabulary to explain it, but now I know what that meant. So in Kawangware, a church called St. Francis of Assisi is hosting Harambes. And in the usual nature, the MP is invited for this Harambe. So the MP comes, I am representing the church with doing, with performing these poems. Because remember, now my reputation precedes me. They already know that in school I normally do it. My mom is dressed to the nines. She's wearing her nice pink outfit. I'm wearing blue Savco jeans with a white shirt inside. And I think now I realize how I've always loved denim and always loved like wearing that with like my sports shoes and whatever. And I'm performing in front of church while it's, the Harambe is happening and the MP is so happy. And he calls me up again on stage and does the same gift. I think that time was like 500 bob and does the gifting. And again, the whole place goes crazy. And again, it's me. The spotlight is on me. He now is defecting. We're talking about 1997. So I am exactly 12 years old. He's now defecting from DP, which is the opposition party, to KANU, the ruling party. KANU is obviously headed by the late President Moi. And remember at that time we're talking about iron fist sort of leadership. He then decides that now he wants to have me on his, what's the word? The day that he's defecting to KANU, he wants to have me perform my poem. And the poem was, maisha ni mapambano na mwenye nguvu mpishe. So, and the last, and so he sends his emissaries to school to come and pick me. Where? The headmistress calls me in class. I'm called. I go to the office. She literally calls me to where she's seated and she asks me, do you know these guys? And I say, I don't know these people, but I know him. I know him. He's a driver to the MP. Because remember, I had met him a couple of times because of that whole Harambe happening in church. And then he asks me, then he had to call my dad. She had to call my dad. Mrs. Njomo then had to call my dad to explain that some people had actually come to pick his son and they're taking me to Nyayo house. And I mean, that time, if someone is going to Nyayo house, bro, probably, it's not even probably, it's not a good thing. So, I mean, he knows the context and he says yes. And I will never forget, I had very torn sweaters at that time. So, and I think they'll probably hand me downs from my brother. In fact, I remember even in school, when you know you're poor. In fact, I remember looking in school and realizing that kids in school used to have sweaters that were like from, let's say, Nairobi Sports. I don't know, from Nairobi Sports or whatever. And our sweaters were actually, my mom actually made our sweaters. So when we talk about, like, even if one string just comes off, it's like a whole, it's like an algorithm of cotton or whatever. Let's go viral. That thing just leaves. So I'll never forget our headmistress, Mrs. Njomo, using a biro tip to try and fix that thing together. And then and also she realized it wasn't working. So she rolled that whole sweater all the way to the top, just so that Nini wouldn't be seen. And so I went to Nyayo House, where I presented this poem to a representative of the president, just so that they made sure that I didn't have anything funny. And I think now that I'm older, I realize, those times were tough. If people had to, like, even a poem, like, it had to be, subjected to, let's see if this makes sense and, whatever. It had to be vetted. So that happens, and then now I'm good to go to perform for the president, because the MP was insisting that I had to be the one to perform for the president. And I remember going to and this is the interesting thing, the most interesting thing about this story, that when I was in standard 5, because now you have to prepare and stuff, and I think my dad was smart enough. My dad ensured that, I think he struck a deal with the MP. I've just never known how much it was or what it meant, but they struck a deal, and I know for a fact some money exchanged hands there. And I've never actually asked my parents, like, by the way, how much did you guys get from me performing for the president? And the interesting thing is that on this same street or this same road that I live in now is where the former MP and the MP of Dagoretti then, called KK, lives. So as I leave this road, as I leave my place and go to town or whatever, every single day that I pass his house. And that is a place where I went to in standard 5. I went to his house and spent the night there. And now we're becoming like family friends, So I'm staying there. And that was the first time. I remember telling my parents and telling them, by the way, guys, just so you guys know, I saw Moi with my 2 eyes. And I will never forget Moi coming to visit, the late president coming to visit that MP. And I was at either the balcony or one of the top rooms over there, and seeing him without like a whole convoy of people. And I know that he had come to whatever deal that struck with, now that he's defecting, but I know money was exchanging hands. It was the first time for me to see a juice dispenser. Let me tell you, I drank juice. And when now the wife of the MP is like, she's treating me like her son, like, what do you want? Like, what do you need? It was like a free for all. It was the first time that I was taken to, I'd gone to Sarit before. Because of being smart, and I'd always, win like, number 3. I was number 2 this time in school, or I did reading contents and I was number 1, or would go to like get books from the vouchers. But it was the first time ever that now I went to Sarit for like a lunch or something with the family now of the MP. It was the first time that I was taken into a toy store and bought for like some magic games, or you put a coin inside, but if you put your hand, you can't touch the coin. But then you've actually put a coin inside. If you flip it, the coin gets out. It was the first time for me to experience that, and for me to experience being spoiled in that way, and because of my talent. So I remember like being taken back home. It was a rainy day, and the irony is that the roads are not done at all, and it was the responsibility of this MP. But he couldn't do anything then, because the governments were national governments. Even money was, it wasn't devolved or whatever. So I remember being taken back home in a Pajero after a whole day of activities in the evening, and thinking, wow, your talent actually can take you in front of kings and queens. So on the day of performing for the president, my dad, only my mom and I attended. Also remember those times were very political times, so my dad wouldn't want to be seen around like a Kanu event or whatever. Also, those days cops would you just look strange and they would arrest you. So you just look like, do you really love the president? And they'll arrest your ass. So but the funny thing is that, and how God works, is that because of Moi's style, and the event was being held at Ndorarua grounds, what he did was that Moi placed speakers every single corner of Kawangware. So when it got to the point of me doing the poem, every single person had that moment. So it's not taken away from me that this this is a very powerful moment, and I think that was now my highlight for me as Anto, growing up, and also realizing that wow, what my talent can do. Kama vile huyo kijana amesema, maisha ni mapambano, na sasa hivi KANU iko kila mahali, iko kwa roho za watu. KANU ndio baba, KANU ndio mama. Kwa hivyo wacha KANU ipishwe. Bro, me just in there thinking I'm being referenced by a president. I come from Kawangware, a place called Gatina. By the way, guys, Gatina, where I come from, it means behind. It means Akasmall behind. So I don't know why those guys decided to name the place where I was born Akasmall behind, because it's just like, guy, you're on top of being poor, you have shitty name, literally. I mean, they would have come up with a name that just, reflects that one day we will make. They could have called even Jerusalem. Like one day, Bethlehem. I was born in Bethlehem in Kawangware. Nothing, just Kamatako.